Welcome in, everybody, to the Week 15 NFL Power Rankings show. That means we have 1 month of football left here. I think some teams near the top of this list today have started to settle down and show us that they're prepared to play their best football in the home stretch. And then we have a handful of teams that, honestly, still with a month left to play, a lot to show us and a lot of questions yet to answer. Very fun week of football to react to and to break down here today. Please do hit that like button down below if you enjoy the power rankings. If you enjoy this video, it really does help me out. And of course, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss all of my other NFL content. But let's go ahead and begin at the bottom, the booty tier at number 32, the Las Vegas Raiders, who for the gambling folk in attendance there in Las Vegas against Denver, the Raiders did cover with a last-minute touchdown this week against Denver. But this team's going through the motions, and I continue to not really see a future with Pete Carroll as the head coach of this team. Then at number 31, I actually have the Washington Commanders here. Jaden Daniels beat up again, took a lot of hits in this game where he's trying to show fight for his teammates. I think at this point, can we just shut him down for the year, get a high draft pick, and move on? I mean, we get it. The dude is tough, but let's be smart about this. And I think they were when they took him out at halftime of this game. But I think that little hoorah against Denver on their, I would hope, their last primetime game of this season, you know, showing some effort for the national crowd there last week, I think that has faded away quickly, and this team has returned to being genuinely one of the very worst teams in football, and they have a lot of work to do this offseason. Then at number 30, the New York Giants, who were on bye this week. We're going to go ahead and move past them as they're going to be going through the motions the rest of this season. At number 29, the Cleveland Browns, keeping this spot after they lose to the Tennessee Titans. However, I think this was about as good of a week as you could have possibly asked for if you're a Browns fan. Myles Garrett creeps closer to the sack record. You lose and put yourself in better draft position against the team that was positioned with the number 1 draft pick. And most importantly, Shedeur Sanders looked pretty good this week. There was an ugly interception in there, but I think if you just erase all of the draft fall and the whole narrative surrounding Shedeur Sanders, if you just got into the football of it all and read his pre-draft write-up as, at least for me and I think most people, kind of a late first, early second round caliber quarterback prospect who fell for all of the other reasons, not getting into that, but if you just read the eval, watched his tape this week against Tennessee, you would say that game made a lot of sense. There were about 4 really nice throws from Shedeur, and they were the exact types of Shedeur throws that were so good with him coming out of Colorado. His best trait for me was ball placement. Maybe not consistent accuracy. There's some missed throws with Shedeur, but he has that ability to put the ball exactly where it needs to be, whether it's the Jerry Jeudy big play where it's a 20-yard post and he hits him perfectly in stride, multiple red zone touchdown throws that were just perfect ball placement, the Harold Fannin touchdown, the first touchdown in this game that was to Njoku, really nice catch. And then there was some good play extension in there as well, mixed with some questionable bailing out of clean pockets. I mean, this really was the full Shedeur evaluation in one game, but to me that is something like a starting caliber quarterback. My best version for Shedeur coming out was always something like a Brock Purdy, and I think this was a Purdy-esque game, if you ask me. So good to see that if you're Cleveland, and you at least have something to watch, and I think that was his best game. I haven't been moved necessarily by Shedeur to this point, but really good to see that. So we got to spend some time on Cleveland there this week. And then at number 28, the Tennessee Titans, who do end up winning this game after a disastrous 2-point attempt for the win from Cleveland, by the way. But likewise for Tennessee, obviously you're going to have conversations about draft positioning and stuff like that, and we'll see how the tiebreakers end up shaking down between them and the Raiders, or if Tennessee keeps winning and all that. But overall with Tennessee, you're talking about a team that you want to find pieces, start to build some confidence in that locker room. I think I caught Mike McCoy's post-game locker room, hoorah speech with the teammates, and he was like, he said it well, like your hard work and getting a win like this, it will pay off in the long run. I think for Tennessee, on top of adding talent and getting draft picks and all that, they do have to learn how to win. So I think at some point getting a win like that is important. And they continue to really prove that they have found some building blocks on offense. I think the offensive line played pretty well considering they were playing Cleveland in this game. The run blocking especially was very nice. Tony Pollard has come back to life after a bad start. Tyjae Spears looks really good. And then you've got these young receivers. Shamari DK just continues to check boxes to me. And Cam Ward continues to not just keep his head above water, the term I've been using with him as he's been, Tennessee's been doing everything they can to drown him here in Tennessee, but he's had some really nice starts in recent weeks. So Tennessee building towards something here as they find themselves at number 28, moving up 3 spots in the power rankings. Then at number 27, the Arizona Cardinals. They have lost 9 of their last 10 games. Another bad injury this week. Paris Johnson goes down with a knee injury. I would imagine they will just shut him down for the year. And that offensive line without Paris Johnson, Cardinals fans, I think you are prepared for this, but they have another thing coming. I mean, he's the only, I like Yelty for a Holt, but he's really the only saving grace on that offensive line at all. I worry about Jacoby Brissett moving forward as well without that blindside protection. Marvin Harrison hasn't been able to get healthy really at any point this season. So it's been a nightmare season for Arizona, obviously, and it is time to drop them into the booty tier after a blowout loss to the Rams. I just don't know how much we can expect those frisky Cardinals that keep games close moving forward. Then the New York Jets at number 26. Same ranking, but they do drop down into the booty tier. I figured they would at least be competitive against the Dolphins. In fact, I picked them to win that game, and boy, was that a bad pick. The defense, not a good week for that unit. A lot of big plays allowed against a Dolphins offense that can get their explosives when they are clicking. But offensively for the Jets, a big reason they're falling a tier here is Tyrod Taylor gets beat up again. They have to go to Brady Cook, and that looked about as you expected. They didn't get a third down conversion in this game, by the way, until complete and utter garbage time on like a quick out or a underneath throw against basically a prevent defense by Miami where they're just trying to bleed out the clock. That's where the Jets were at this week. A pretty hideous performance. Really was just a kick return or a punt return touchdown was all they could get going. So they fall down into the booty tier. Now, before we go up to the frisky tier here, I want to thank the sponsor for today's Power Rankings, SeatGeek. Sports fans, if you are looking to go catch your NFL team before the season's over or with basketball and hockey in full swing, or maybe you want to go check out a concert if there's an artist you've always wanted to go see or someone you're excited that's coming to town, well, SeatGeek has got you covered with the best app, the best user interface. They are the #1 ticketing app out there, and for good reason. They have a great user-friendly color coding system that as long as you look for the green dots, you know you're getting the best prices, not just on that SeatGeek app within all of their ticketing options, but across other platforms as well. I'm consistently looking at other options, and I always find myself back at SeatGeek because I like their app the best. The prices are always competitive, if not even better, on SeatGeek. And you get the tickets right there in your app. You don't have to jump through email chains and track down third-party vendors and have this stressful experience approaching the gate. So SeatGeek has got you covered for all of your ticketing needs. They've been a great partner with me to work with over the years. And if you guys are going somewhere, do it on SeatGeek. Use code TFG10 when you do it, and you'll save $20 on top of all this as well. So thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring the Power Rankings today. And most importantly, have fun wherever it is you guys are headed. All right, let's go to the frisky tier, a cut above in terms of competency from these teams. And congratulations to the New Orleans Saints climbing out of that booty tier. I have been impressed by what Kellen Moore has done with this team. And I know it's weird to hear that from a 3-10 team, but I really thought this Saints team was poised to be the worst team in football this year, like with a bullet. Like when I did my preseason power rankings, there was not an ounce of hesitation who the worst team heading into the year was going to be. And the Saints have been a tough out the vast majority of this season. You know, they have talent deficiencies. They've had some games get away from them for sure. But in large part, they've looked like they did this week against Tampa Bay, hung in close games. And recently, in games like the Panthers game and the Bucs game within this division, they've won some of these games. And they have a quarterback in Tyler Shuck that continues to prove the haters wrong. So many people never wanted to give this guy a chance because of his age coming out. I am very proud to say that I was, from the very get-go, very pro Tyler Shuck. And it's paying dividends for this team because not only is it looking less likely due to this quarterback class just not being what was promised when last year's draft happened, but also the Saints looking like their pick could be anywhere from 3 to 9, and they might not even be in a position to draft a quarterback this year. So it's paying dividends in that sense, but it's also just like paying dividends in the sense that Tyler Shuck looks good. Like, he looks like he has potential to be a franchise quarterback for the Saints. And that was the one thing I did say about him is forget the fact that he's 25. If you're going to take a QB there in the second round, a guy with a really, honestly, a great arm, good athletic traits. You see the scrambles he's been able to make for this team. It's a big deal. Someone that has a lot of experience under his belt and can read defenses and has really great pocket presence at mitigating pressure against the rush. Those are all of the requisite traits for like a top 15 QB. He obviously, for other reasons, didn't have that type of buzz coming out, but there's a lot in there with Tyler Shuck, and it's not a coincidence that they've started winning games with him in there as the starter. So, you know, it's a very, I think, feel-good energy around the Saints right now. The offensive line's in relatively good shape. Devon Vele has shaped up into a really nice acquisition for this team. And also credit where credit's due to Brandon Staley. I still need to see more upside from this defense before I discuss Brandon Staley as a good DC, but it certainly has not been a disaster, and he's got these guys playing really hard. So I will give Brandon Staley some credit as well. So a nice jump for the Saints to get a +5 here and out of the bottom tier in the rankings. Then at number 24, the Atlanta Falcons. They drop another one this week, absolutely slaughtered by the Seattle Seahawks. This team is going nowhere fast, and that's really all I have to say about this team. We've had a lot of conversations in recent weeks about my lack of belief in Raheem Morris and the questions they're going to have in that quarterback room as they approach 2026. Then at number 23, the Minnesota Vikings. Talk about a team that has had questions about their quarterback room. At least you know, the storm has at least settled for a week in Minnesota, with maybe a hint of sunshine peeking through the dark, thunder clouds. I'm not ready to say, okay, JJ McCarthy is back and, we can get excited about him again. It was a very limited, play sheet, if you will, in a game script that was very favorable. McCarthy didn't really have to push it in this week against a very bad Commanders defense, but it's good at least to see that a good game of quarterbacking is in there for JJ McCarthy, a mistake-free game, an accurate game, with some good yardage and touchdown totals in there, and the deep outs do look pretty when JJ McCarthy connects on it. So that plus Brian Flores in this defense. I mean, Brian Flores continues to be a complete luxury that this team is so lucky to have, and I do wonder in a pretty weak pool of head coaching candidates if this is if this is going to be the last few days of Brian Flores as the head coach for this team. But +2 for the Vikings this week, heading back towards competency. Then at number 22, the Miami Dolphins. They do climb to 6-7 as they pick up another win this week. I think there's a case to be made that they deserve to climb out of this tier. They're obviously the best of these 4 teams in this tier. But it's been a pretty weak schedule here as they've gone on this winning streak. But there was that win against the Bills, and they were flat out dominant against the Jets. I'm prepared to admit that this Dolphins team has turned a bit of a corner and is more of a middling, quality team. I think there are a handful of really solid football teams still ahead of them that makes this ranking justified. But dude, Devon Achane is insane. I mean, we probably don't talk about him enough. I don't know if it's the low draft pedigree or the fact that he's small, the fact that he's on this Dolphins team. It's probably a combination of all those things. But man, he's not, and I'm cautious in saying this because you guys know that the praise that I've given Jahmyr Gibbs this year, but he's not that far away from what Jahmyr Gibbs straight up is for the Lions. The ability to run with some power at that size, the vision, the burst, the shiftiness in space. There's a lot there with him. I'm just blown away by the player he's turned into. And that's as someone that, I liked him coming out for what he was, but he's more than just a for what he is type of player. He's a true, genuine superstar, and they leverage this entire offense around his skill set. not dissimilar to what the Lions have done with Gibbs. So that's impressive. And look, defense had a dominant day against the Jets. I'll say that. The D-line has woken up to a certain degree, and it's a competitive, very frisky football team that this week with a much more challenging game, I believe it's Monday night, going to Pittsburgh. If they can win that, certainly will be jumping the Dolphins officially out of this fourth tier here in the rankings. But that is going to wrap up the frisky tier. And now we will get into the playoff fringe category, my third tier here, a very large tier with 8 teams again this week, but different teams than we had last week. And one of those teams dropping into this tier from a higher category is unfortunately going to be the Indianapolis Colts. A -10, which tends to happen with my rankings when the quarterback goes down. And, we're going to find out if they need to go even further down than this. There's a lot of uncertainty with how this team's going to look like in the next month, because on a positive side, they do have so much to work with on offense that, yes, Daniel Jones was playing very well, but maybe Phillip Rivers does have some juice in the tank, who's going to give it a go here, apparently. I thought Riley Leonard showed glimpses last week, more than I certainly expected, with someone that I didn't really like coming out of Notre Dame. I don't know that you're really hanging your hat on that. And then, do all of a sudden do they take a second look at Anthony Richardson's injury as well, and maybe question if they go back down that road? So there's a lot of uncertainty in the QB room, of course. But man, it's just a rough week to be a Colts fan, and that's putting it lightly. I mean, not only your hopes for this season obviously are dwindling. They're currently the 8 seed in the AFC, so they're not even sitting in good playoff positioning after they were sitting in the 1 seed just a month ago. I mean, it's just an incredible fall from grace. And the fact that this has all transpired basically directly after the Sauce Gardner trade, I mean, it's not to pile on, but I think it's worth talking about. That was a very aggressive move for the Colts to make, and it's just backfired in the worst of ways. I mean, now you're likely, that pick that you were hoping was going to be in the late 20s going to the Jets is now going to be in the teens in all likelihood. And you also have major quarterback questions next year. Daniel Jones, yet another injury here. That has been a big story on Daniel Jones, is how injured he's been going back to his time with the Giants. Now an Achilles injury. His availability to start next season is going to be put into question, and how good he's going to be. And he's not under contract either. You have to give that first-round pick to the Jets next year in what looks like an incredible draft class sitting at this seat right here today. And even Adonai Mitchell has shown some good stuff for the Jets. So it's just, not to pile on Colts fans, but it is about as bad of a week to be a fan of any team in the league for the Colts as they fall down a lot this week. And then the Baltimore Ravens going to keep that number 20 spot. Rough week to be a Ravens fan. At least, you're not a fan of the team that your organization used to play in the same city of. But it's also not a good week to be a Ravens fan, man, where you kind of had that game literally in your fingertips. I do disagree with the Isaiah Likely overturn on that touchdown. It felt kind of out of nowhere, and that the league was throwing the Steelers a bone. So I don't know about that one, but regardless of that call, the Ravens did not play well enough in the first half of this game. They allow, in their kind of comeback effort, they still allowed a busted, coverage touchdown that has unfortunately become a bit of an identity of this defense, is just random coverage gaffes that lead to huge yardage and points and mistakes by this defense. But I mean, the Steelers had 2 walk-in touchdowns from the 30-yard line, one to Freiermuth up the seam and one on the dump down to Jalen Warren. And that, made this comeback so much harder than it had to be. So just a bad overall week for the Ravens. You lose a game that they had a chance to win, obviously a high-stakes game against the Steelers there. And also, the team's just not very good. They still struggle to get Derrick Henry going. Unless he's breaking a 20-yard run, it feels like he's getting about 1 or 2 yards, if not less. Lamar had a really ugly interception early in this game. It's just everything's kind of broken for this team. But we dropped them big last week, and I still think this is the right spot for them here at number 20. And then at number 19, the Cincinnati Bengals, who honestly, man, they continue to look good until some really bad breaks allow the Bills back in this game. Unfortunately, you did see the Bengals' defensive issues show back up against Josh Allen. I know it was in the snow, but we also saw this Bengals defense look like this against Pittsburgh a few weeks ago, where guys are tripping over themselves, they can't tackle out in space, and they just look, they look like a college defense out there, and not the Ohio State Buckeyes either. And that was the case here against the Bills. But, man, at the same time, Joe Burrow's really freaking good. Mike Gesicki coming back was like we didn't really talk about it because Noah Fant had some good moments this year. But, God, Mike Gesicki made some really great plays in this game. He's a nice player for them. But if not for a couple of very unlucky, if not fluky interceptions that brought the Bills back in this game, we are talking about, really hyping up this team and how they're positioned to compete for the AFC North. It's still possible, but they do have to win out. But we're not just looking at record with these rankings. We're talking about how good these teams currently are, and being a very competitive team that's sandwiched by their AFC North counterparts here, I think is still fair for the Bengals. And that is where the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to come in here with the 18th ranking. They get the big win against the Ravens. And while I kind of question the Isaiah Likely touchdown, and I think they got some gifts late in this game to hold off the Ravens, you do still have to talk about how good the Steelers were early in this game. And the fact that Aaron Rodgers seems to have bounced back from a really rough month of football. He had his best game as a Steeler, in my opinion. He had some incredible, vintage throws in this game, not just launching those deep balls to DK Metcalf. There were multiple just dropping the ball into a bucket deep balls in this game. But he has a play rolling left where he hits, again, DK Metcalf just perfectly in stride. And that was after just multiple plays of vintage Aaron Rodgers pocket presence, where he's buying that time, he's mitigating pressure, showing some mobility on that throw, on the touchdown run. I mean, he just was good in this game. He was the reason they won, on top of DK Metcalf having a really good game. So it's good to see some offensive explosiveness. I think the defense at this point, we know what they are. They're a flawed defense that can get some big moments from their pass rush. And they got the big moment from Alex Highsmith to put this game away at the very, very end. So the Steelers getting a +3 as the AFC North stays very tightly knit together. I still think it's going to be a fascinating close. I think it's far from over with the Steelers winning here in Week 14. But then the Carolina Panthers on a bye week, they get a +1 here as the Colts take that dramatic plunge here. And then they're going to be right next to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 16. And I'm just going to kind of lump these two teams together here, two 7-6 NFC South teams. Obviously, the Panthers coming off the bye week. I don't have really any new information on them to add here. But this is going to be really fun to see how this finishes. And it's because, frankly, the Bucs have fallen off from being a trustworthy playoff contender. And trustworthy maybe isn't even the right word, because even when they were winning, and I had them ranked as high as the top 5 at a point when a lot of fans said that was too low and they should be the number 1 team at a certain week in the season. I think it was after the Seahawks win. But their sort of high variance style has come back to a screeching halt. And maybe it's just, regressing back to the mean for what we felt like we were watching at the time, where it's Baker running around. It's these really high difficulty completions to Emeka Egbuka, who we have to have a conversation, man. Emeka Egbuka had an incredible start to his career, but he has not been a very good receiver for about 2 months now. He had another brutal drop here this week. His contested catch win rate is down to 33% on the season. He's 2 for his last 10 going back to week 7. That's just not a number 1 wide receiver. And the only reason we have to bring this up is because when they were so good, he was able to produce as this team's number 1. You kind of peel that piece back and you're left with, Baker getting let down by his wide receivers at times, and Godwin has come back and shown some juice, but he's not been able to be like a major impact quite yet. But injuries on the offensive line, Baker having to do too much with his legs, where I think we know from Baker, at least until proven otherwise, like you're going to get some really exciting scrambles, some great throws on the run. You're going to get some mistakes in there as well. 3 turnover-worthy plays this week against the Saints, and I think it's very fitting that Baker, at the end of all this, now sits here with 22 big-time throws and 22 turnover-worthy plays. 6th in big-time throws, making some of those big plays happen, yet behind only Tua Tagovailoa for the most turnover-worthy plays in football. So it's a sporadic brand of offense, and this defense just isn't living up to the Todd Bowles brand. Their front, to me, is just very limited in capacity. So they're a very middling football team, and that's exactly why they rank number 16. I think they're very beatable, making this finishing stretch between them and the Panthers going to be a very fascinating. They play twice in the last month here. Those games will very likely decide the winner of this division, which is fun. But then at number 15, the Kansas City Chiefs dropping out of that higher tier, dropping into the playoff fringe category. I still think the caliber of football team here with Kansas City is still a highly competitive, any given Sunday type of team. Obviously, the 6-7 record is an eyesore, and at this point, likely to keep them out of the dance at the end of the day. And just, how the mighty have fallen. I mean, even if they do go on this miracle 4-game run and a 10-7 record happens to get them into the playoffs as the 7 seed, which it's getting less and less likely by the day. I think with the Chargers win, their playoff likelihood that we saw Sunday night was at 16%. I think that probably even went down lower, I would think. But even if they do get in, outside of Chiefs magic, voodoo magic, Mahomes, they've done it before, they'll do it again. Like outside of that, there's really no reason to look at this team and be like, yeah, they could win a Super Bowl. Even in the landscape of this NFL that's pretty wide open, I don't believe that. I mean, the defense played well against the Texans. This was a week where Chris Jones did show up, and that showed up for their defense, but they just can't play complementary football in the way that we're so used to with this team. I mean, the Chiefs' offense just can't pick up the slack, and I know they were playing the Texans' defense. That's why it was a fascinating matchup with that game, but the identity crisis of this offense is real, man. Their inability to find a running back to lean into the run game, and they're dealing with offensive line issues right now, which certainly doesn't help, but the wide receiver room, it's just not a ideally constructed group. You've got Kelsey dropping passes, Rashee Rice having to be your reliable number 1 guy, and we saw him with a big drop in this game. You've got all these other speedsters at wide receiver that feel like they make big plays when you don't need it, but can't make big plays when you do need it, if that makes any sense, which it probably doesn't, because this Chiefs offense doesn't make any sense when you put the whole picture together. And I mean, it comes back to Andy Reid. Like I just don't think Andy Reid is doing a good job coaching this football team this year. It doesn't mean he isn't a Hall of Fame coach and incredible at what he does, but it's just been kind of a stinker of a year from the Chiefs putting together a winning football team. So they find themselves at number 15, and then the Dallas Cowboys also fall out of the higher tier into the playoff fringe category. They fall to 6-1. Maybe they will finish as the first team to finish 500 in the era of 17-game seasons. Would be fascinating. They needed to come down after their defense showed some serious regression back towards early season Cowboys. Now, it was the Lions, but it was also a disastrous effort against the Lions. Getting ran all over, showing those porous, frustrating moments from Matt Eberflus where you need a stop, yet you're out there just calling like base cover 2 or cover 3. And Dan Campbell, who's gone against Matt Eberflus for years, knew exactly what coverage he was going to get when they needed to put the game away, and they attacked the middle of the field relentlessly against these zone coverages. So the lack of adjustment from the coaching staff, the players not executing, just a frustrating day for Dallas where they needed to come down. I still think a lot of the stuff we've praised this team for, and the fact that generally speaking they have course corrected and are heading in a good direction, I still think there's room for this team to come out of the year with some positive energy. But obviously this was a punch to the gut when you thought things were maybe going in an exciting direction for this season for Dallas, and now kind of getting put in your place by a more legitimate contender in the NFC. Just kind of, not a great feeling for the Cowboys this week. But that's going to tie a ribbon on our playoff fringe tier. We're now going to go up to our next tier. And if we just rewind to last week real quick, I had grouped this tier as a massive tier at the top of the league, really making a point about how this year the NFL is just wide open. You can pick holes in all of the contenders this year. It's not like a typical season where certain teams really have set themselves apart around the week 14 mark, and you could really establish these are your true Super Bowl frontrunners. These are other competitive playoff teams. This year's just been different in that sense. And I still stand by that sentiment at large. But I do think with some of the results this week, I think we're starting to see at least a little bit of a split in some of these teams. We also have some teams like the Colts, Chiefs, and Cowboys that have dropped out of this tier entirely. Some other teams that are playing well enough with some more impressive wins to jump into this tier. So as we know, the league framework changes week to week. But the way I've split this up now with our top remaining teams is this tier are more flawed playoff teams, and then the next tier that we'll get to will be less flawed playoff teams. Kind of emblematic there of what this season has meant with the NFL. But at number 13, I do have the Los Angeles Chargers jumping up into this category. Big, impressive win against the Eagles. Offensively, they're going through it, right? Their offensive line issues are a major issue, and I think will continue to be an issue. That is the fatal flaw of this team. It's why they're in this category. But I think for their defense to step up in the way that they did against the Eagles, outside of really a big run by Saquon on a fake tush push and, a couple of chunk runs in there, they largely did a much better job than I expected, limiting Saquon on early downs, forcing Jalen Hurts into those challenging third downs. And then I thought overall, great execution by Jesse Minter and this defense, because that to me has been on top of the offensive issues with the offensive line, a major concern for me. But to see an effort like that against the Eagles is very encouraging for me. Encouraging for me for the Chargers, that this can be a more competitive team down the stretch than I've maybe even given them credit for the last couple of weeks. So it's a +2 on the Chargers as they got out a challenging win this week on Monday Night Football. And then the San Francisco 49ers, who were on bye this week, they're going to jump up here just as we've kind of split this tier up and defined it differently. I think this better fits the Niners, who are very much in position to get into the playoffs. I still have major questions, especially with their defense and the existing talent that they have to work with. That's their fatal flaw. But I think offensively with Shanahan, with Purdy, with, McCaffrey, Kittle, they've got horses to play that ball control style of offense, try to keep their defense fresh and competitive. They have their formula. I think if they're thrown out of their game script, they could run into some troubles. But at a 9-4 spot coming off the bye week, this feels like proper placement for the Niners. But then at number 11, the Jacksonville Jaguars, our biggest riser this week, a +6, jumping up a tier. And I'm just so impressed by this team's ability to course correct here after really a midseason stretch of highly questionable football play, especially from the passing game. That, man, the last 2 weeks have been the best games Trevor Lawrence has played, certainly this year and in a long time. Just incredible throws, taking better care of the football. The accuracy stuff, it's still in there, but it's not as prevalent. Things are really clicking. The addition of Jacoby Myers has been huge, and Brian Thomas Jr. has his swagger back. That is massive. I've talked about how this team can run the ball. The defense has been competitive, but to see the passing game settle in now into the second half of the Liam Cohen's, the first year of Liam Cohen's regime here is extremely encouraging. And I think the fact that this team has now twice kind of, at least from my perspective, like proved me wrong, to a degree. I think I'm not the only one that doubted this Jags team coming into the year, but the toughness that this team showed to come out and be as good as they were to start the year. Yes, a midseason slump, but the resiliency and the coaching ability to turn this thing back around, it's very impressive. And whatever happens with the Jags the rest of the year, I think if you're a Jags fan, that point right there is especially encouraging. But right now, I'm very intrigued by this Jags team. I am. I think, especially with what we talked about the passing game, that's been by far their biggest bugaboo on the year. And I feel more confident in what they're doing the last couple of weeks throwing the football. I like the run game a lot. I think the defense is very solid. It's not a great defense, but they certainly have enough, and they're well coached with Anthony Campanelli. So up to number 11 here, very much a playoff caliber team. Their flaw is just, they have a lot to prove yet to go as kind of a new upstart team. But overall, I think the Jags are not to be taken lightly. They have a lot going on right now in their favor. And the fact that this is all without Travis Hunter, like I said, whatever happens the rest of the year, I think you're feeling pretty damn good about the future of Jags football under Liam Cohen, especially with Trevor Lawrence, certainly shaping back up into form like the 2022, maybe early 2023 version of Trevor. But then at number 10, this is where I'm going to have the Philadelphia Eagles. They're such a tough team to rank for me. I know it's going to be easy for a lot of people to just completely write this team off and bury them in the rankings and all that. I still think this team on a week-to-week basis is an incredibly difficult out. They are expected to get Lane Johnson back here. We'll see how healthy he is. And no Jalen Carter in that game against the Chargers as well. That's a big deal for their defense. Not that it really slowed down their pass rush, but that might have been enough to really set it over the edge to win that game with their defense. But anyway, I still believe in the talent of this Eagles team. And as hard as I am on Jalen Hurts, you're not going to get 4 turnovers from him every week. But that was definitely a colossal disaster of a day from Jalen Hurts and why they lost that game. And the fact that he is playing as bad as he has this year, I think it's funny. I swear this is the 4th time this year that I've gone at it with Eagles fans on Twitter where they say, this is the first time Jalen Hurts has played genuinely bad this year. I'm like, okay, well, how many weeks are we going to say that about him? I mean, look, you guys can keep throwing eggs at Kevin Patullo's house, and I don't think he's perfect, right? Like, I don't. I think we've seen examples of guys like Shane Steichen and Kellen Moore bringing really good play calling to the mix with this Eagles team. There's better play callers out there that could probably help you navigate this situation. But Jalen Hurts is a very challenging quarterback to coordinate for because what he's good at is running a high school offense, which involves slants, hitches, go balls, basically find one-on-ones, attack it with elite wide receivers. And if you don't like what you see there, just try to scramble, whether you have a clean pocket or not. And if you can't create anything in scramble drill, just throw the ball away and we'll trust our defense. Yet when A.J. Brown's not playing like an elite wide receiver, which he's obviously not this year, there's been plenty of moments where he's let Jalen Hurts down. It happened twice in this game. Could have had a game-winning touchdown on the one of the best throws. I mean, probably the best throw Jalen Hurts made all day. That beautiful over-the-shoulder touch pass, and then one of those Jalen Hurts interceptions was right off the hands of A.J. Brown. So you're not getting that element of things. You don't have the incredible run game to support it. I do still think the Eagles' defense is incredibly trustworthy, but what ends up happening then is the team doesn't have as much success as they had, say, last year, and then you get people saying, well, you need to run more of a pro-style offense. You got to stop just running slants, hitches, and go balls. You got to attack the middle of the field. And then what happens with Jalen Hurts is sometimes he'll see it, sometimes he'll throw it, but for every one of those, there's another 1 or 2 times where you load up the coach's tape and you see him just passing up crossing routes and digs and these middle of the field throws that at times they are listening to Eagles fans and calling more middle of the field routes. Again, sometimes Hurts hits it, sometimes he doesn't and he bails out of a clean pocket, or he forces it into triple coverage and it gets intercepted like we saw in this Chargers game. And then you end up with this impossible balance of like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Do you call the high school offense that has an incredibly low upside when the surrounding cast isn't as good as it was last year? Or do you try to put more on Jalen Hurts' plate that's also going to lead to disastrous turnovers and missed reads and missed throws? So I get that the convenient thing is to just blame the play calling, but I think it's a lot more complex than that, and it all comes back to Jalen Hurts, who is the Eagles' issue right now. He just is. And if you want to point to a Super Bowl MVP because they can't give it to the entire defense or the entire offensive line, they had to pick somebody in that game to give the award to. Or if you want to point to the fact that this team that within the last decade also won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, if you want to point to that and then just continue to complain about people like me only focusing on Jalen Hurts, well, that's fine. That's your prerogative to complain about what you want to complain about. But the fact of the matter is, this is a great defense. Yeah, Lane Johnson's beat up, but this is still a really good offensive line. We saw in moments this game they can run the ball with Saquon. Okay, A.J. Brown's not playing like the old A.J. Brown, but he still makes incredible plays at times. And you have Devonta Smith and you have Dallas Goedert. I also happen to think that Jahan Dotson's a pretty good wide receiver 3 that just has complete irrelevancy in this offense because of Jalen Hurts. Look, he's the problem in Philadelphia. I'm sorry. And again, people can keep just complaining that I'm biased against Jalen Hurts and I won't shut up about him. I'm just calling it like I see it right now, man. I think this is otherwise a very good football team, and because of all the other elements of this team, they are an incredibly tough out, and I still have them ranked number 10. It's just without an absolute God squad offensive group with some of the O-line regression and, A.J. Brown not playing as well, you just start seeing this offense just isn't very good with the QB at hand. And I'm sorry, that's just how I see it. But then at number 9, the Chicago Bears falling down 2 spots this week with a couple of other teams right in this area that we're about to talk about, I think, having bigger wins that deserve to go up above Chicago. But largely, I think you look at that game, them going into Lambeau and playing a competitive game, and I don't think you feel too different about the Bears. I think that game probably looked about as you might have expected, where they leaned into the run game, which I think matchup-wise was the right approach, and into the second half, they were able to assert themselves with that ground game. So a continuation of them being able to run the ball. I didn't expect too much from this defense, and they did get another Jordan Love turnover, though this one wasn't really like some of the other turnovers they've had in other weeks where they're great plays by the DBs. This one was just one of those Jordan Love moments where you're looking at him like, why? Why, Jordan? Why? He just throws it straight to a defender. But likewise with the Bears defense, I don't fully trust them when they're not getting turnovers, and I think that's largely what we saw in this game. And then I think from the passing game, with Rome Odunze out especially, you come out of that with a lot of questions about how consistent are they going to be able to be throwing the football. Caleb Williams, I think, was totally fine against the Packers. A lot of pressure on him. Honestly, the offensive line couldn't really hold up against Micah Parsons and co. But, there's probably some rhythm throws and some stuff that you want to see from Caleb, and just the overall passing game isn't quite where they need it to be. That's the biggest stage that we need to see from the development of this team. Again, this is still year 1 of Caleb with Ben Johnson here. It's, I think, only the beginning. But I think with a win against the Eagles a week ago, a competitive game against Green Bay, the Bears are still in the mix, and they are not an easy out. And we might see them, by the way, back in first place in the NFC North, and just basically a week from now, hosting Green Bay as the number 1 team in the NFC North, because Green Bay's got to go to Denver and Chicago hosts Cleveland. So that could be very fascinating, and I'm very excited for a rematch here in a few weeks. But then at number 8, the Houston Texans, who continue their climb. Just championship caliber defense, man. That's what this is all about. I continue to kind of make comparisons to the Denver Broncos Super Bowl winning team where, whether it was Brock Osweiler or Peyton Manning, it didn't really matter. I mean, they really feel like they're playing at that level on that side of the ball. Obviously, CJ Stroud's very different from Peyton Manning, but they have issues offensively. The O-line issues came back this week pretty bad. CJ Stroud made some throws happen, made some plays happen, but I've defended Stroud, but he's just not playing particularly consistent football within the confines of this offense. So it's really about the defense here, but it's been enough to win games. And as long as they can get a few plays from Stroud and Nico Collins, like it's so nice that they have a genuinely elite wide receiver like Nico Collins to just help get some explosive plays and get enough points on the board. Because that's really what this is about: is can you get to 20 points, and you're probably going to win if you're Houston. And that's just not that bad of a formula, especially in the landscape of this year's NFL. But that is going to conclude our tier of more flawed playoff teams. Now we'll go to our very top tier of less flawed playoff teams. And not a lot of movement in terms of the listing here, especially 1 through 6. But all these teams really having good weeks or bye weeks. And then the Detroit Lions, I'm willing to put back into this category. I think that was a really impressive win against Dallas for the offense to ignite in the way that they did. I mean, it's just with Detroit, man, when they are on, they are one of the best, if not the best teams in football. They do have some questions with their secondary. I think that's very fair. I mean, even DJ Reed has not looked very good. Terry and Arnold shut down for the year. They're not a great defense, but they are a highly frisky defense, and they're not a fun defense to go against. And I think a team like Dallas with those receivers, I know CeeDee Lamb left in the second half. That was a big blow. They're poised to put up some points. And Green Bay, when they are clicking with their passing game, they can put up some points on this Lions defense. There's a reason they rank 7 and not higher, right? But, man, for Amon-Ra to tough it out in the way that he did, he should be healthy moving forward. Jahmyr Gibbs with what he's doing. These Lions still just have an it factor about them, even if they haven't been as consistent as you would like to see for the course of the season. But they're positioning themselves well there, I think, with a win against Dallas. We'll see how they play the Rams this week. I think that game is far from a given for the Rams, given how well Detroit can run the football. But outside of that, I mean, with the Week 18 game against the Bears coming up, I still think Detroit has a pretty good shot at getting in. But it's certainly not a guarantee either. But then, spoiler alert, 1 through 6, it's actually the same 1 through 6 as last week. I don't see a big need to change the order. I think I had the order right last week. I got Green Bay at 6, obviously a big win against Chicago. I think for the offense to seemingly, shaking off that midseason rut that they got in right around the time of that Tucker Kraft injury. Jordan Love's playing so much better football. This Jordan Love game was such a classic, like what the argument for Jordan Love is, like one way or another, whichever side of it you're on, because the overall picture on Jordan Love is he doesn't actually turn the ball over that much. So many people say, he's just like Jameis Winston. It's like, well, if you look at the actual rate of turnovers, it's just not true. He's actually 6th out of 26 quarterbacks in lowest turnover-worthy play rate on the season. But when he does turn the football over, they just tend to be some of the most just like head-scratching, what the hell were you thinking, either fumbles, like trying to do too much, or interceptions in this case, just throwing it straight to a defender. So his turnovers admittedly are uglier than most quarterbacks' turnovers, I think. But beyond the interception, Jordan Love was fantastic in this game, and the reason that they overall were able to kind of hold off the Bears' comeback efforts. And then the Packers' defense continues to show what they're capable of. I think you can run the ball against the Packers, but if the offense has given them that complementary support like they have in this game and other weeks, the Giants game wasn't dissimilar in the sense that the Giants were running the ball, but it just wasn't enough explosiveness from the offense to win the game when the passing game was working as well as it was. Yeah, I mean, if you have to throw against this Packers defense, it's very challenging. So it does feel like this team has settled in and is prepared to play their best, most importantly, their most consistent football down the stretch here after being, a frustrating team at points in this season, kind of playing down to their competition at points in the year. But they're also starting to rack up some impressive wins as well. And then at number 5, the Denver Broncos, who do play Green Bay this week, should be a fun one. Effectively a bye week, as they got to play the Raiders this week. Don't really have too much new information to add on this team. I don't think much differently about them as a premium defense and an offense that can frustrate you at times, but does have a certain identity about them. But then at number 4, the Buffalo Bills. Once a year, Josh Allen has a game where I find myself watching and saying, that's the best game I've ever seen a quarterback play. This was that game this year. Just an unbelievable effort against the Bengals. This has been more of a run game oriented team, but this week was your vintage Josh Allen MVP, just straight up putting the team on his back. I mean, some of the scrambles he had were obviously a signature of this game, but not just that. I mean, some of these throws on the run, the touchdown he throws, was it to Khalil Shakir rolling right? I think it was the first touchdown the Bills scored. Just absurd. He had multiple throws on the run to keep drives alive. Just incredible stuff. And it was a reminder in this game. Yes, it was against the Bengals defense, but it was a reminder like, dude, when Josh Allen is clicking and locked in, there's nobody better in the sport. There just isn't, Patrick Mahomes included. And if this is a sign that, all right, the Bills have been kind of coasting through the season, have had some issues, but now that we're in December and gearing up for a Super Bowl run, if this is a sign of things to come from Josh Allen, I mean, this team is just going to be incredibly difficult to beat when you have a quarterback capable of doing things that Josh Allen does. Because it's not like he's anything close to bad in structure, right? Like if there's throws to be made, he will make them. But just the inability to get this team off the field when you think you've got him can be a real problem. And the defense is what they are, right? They're the Sean McDermott high floor defense. You kind of need Josh Allen to do that. But boy, was it fun to see. Then at number 3, the New England Patriots on bye this week, but very excited to see this team face the Bills and Ravens the next couple of weeks. I think this team has shown all the signs of a legit football team. There's some questions about the on-paper roster talent and the strength of their schedule. I think it's very legitimate to raise those points, but excited to see the next 2 weeks, December football. I think an opportunity for this team to kind of sharpen their knives, become a little more battle-tested as they approach the playoffs here. But obviously at number 3, and Drake May playing at the level he's playing at, gotta like a lot of things about this Patriots team. And then at number 2, the Seattle Seahawks, who boat race the Atlanta Falcons this week, get back to doing their thing. I mean, when this team, they can just overwhelm you, man, with that defense, the explosive plays they're able to get on offense. Darnold continues to show some like shaky moments, which I think until we get through the playoffs with a team that now has Super Bowl expectations, you're never really going to fully trust Sam Darnold, I think, until he can go on that run. That's really the one thing with this team and some of the O-line issues that I think have, on paper, we knew that O-line was going to be questionable. We've seen that surface a little bit more in recent weeks, but sometimes it just doesn't matter when the defense is, as talented and as together as they are in that side of the ball. Big week from Nicky Manwari again this week. Just love what Seattle's got going on. And then the Rams at number 1, major bounce back week, dominating the Arizona Cardinals. Glad I kept them at number 1, kind of explaining away some of the issues that showed up in that Panthers game with some uncharacteristic turnovers that if you watched all the other Rams games this year, you kind of figured that wasn't going to happen every week. And then they come back to just looking like that incredibly efficient offense. They are so scary because of all of the answers they have on offense. You have this massive Rolodex of things they can go to with the experience between Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay and the chemistry that those guys have developed playing so much football together at this point. And then the fact that they can run the ball, they can throw the ball, they have all these different options in the passing game. And then defensively, like I think you can, if you have a really good run game, you can move the ball against this defense a little bit, but this pass defense is very intimidating with how they get after it up front. So they are, to me, of the league of flawed teams this year, they are definitely the least flawed and deserve to be number 1, but right there next to Seattle. We get that game next Thursday, by the way. Again, cannot wait. But there are your Week 15 NFL Power Rankings. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please do hit that like button on the way out. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of the rankings this week. And I will see you guys for the next one. Cheers.